Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. This is part 2 of the May 2020 Q&A. Feels like this year's been flying along for us, probably a bit slow for everyone else with the current situation being home, but it's been pretty busy lately with all the CPU reviews and all that sort of thing that we've been covering on the channel. So, yeah, time's been going quick. But anyway, we're at the end of May.
I'm just going to jump in there. Tim doesn't have kids.
Well,
so
that's true.
Smooth sailing for him. All these people having to do homeschool and everything. It's probably been a very slow year. So
yeah, okay, fair enough. Quick for me then. Anyway, we got more questions, more YouTube questions coming up right now. Go back, check part 1 if you haven't already. That's the other half of the YouTube questions, and part 3 is coming soon. Let's get into it. Let's get into those questions. I remember a video regarding PCIe 4.0 transfer speeds and GPU limited 4GB of VRAM resulting in better performance than PCIe 3.0. So that would have been the RX 5500 XT content. Will this work on a B550? Thank you a lot for your in-depth analysis and content. So you think the answer would be yeah, right?
Definitely will. So basically, we're talking about the 4GB VRAM version versus the 8GB VRAM version. It has to tap into system memory more. And to do that, it has to go through the PCI Express bus, and those particular cards are wired for 8 times only bandwidth. So that creates a problem when you're using PCIe 3.0 because you're halving the bandwidth. But PCIe 4.0 gets you back up to the same bandwidth you would have had at PCIe 3.0 with a 16 times connection. B550 chipsets don't actually support PCIe 4.0, but the motherboards do. So you will have a PCIe 4.0 link to your primary graphics card and your primary NVMe M.2 storage device. Yep. So yeah, I still wouldn't recommend buying a 5500 XT. It's just not a particularly good graphics card in my opinion. I'd rather buy a 1650 Super just for the flexibility of having proper PCIe 3.0 support. But anyway, that's a whole different thing. But in short, yes, you will see the same effect on the B550 motherboards as you did on the X570.
Next question is, new AMD and NVIDIA GPUs are rumored to launch in September, the month as...
This one, sorry, just to interrupt. This one was actually tagged and addressed at Tim. I'm certain of it. So they're asking you this, Tim.
All right, fair enough. New AMD and NVIDIA GPUs are rumored to launch in September, the same month as the long-awaited Cyberpunk 2077. Do you think this is a coincidence, or can game releases be big enough to influence huge product launches? So my first thought on this is probably not, especially because Cyberpunk was originally supposed to be coming out, I think, in April of this year, and then it was delayed to September. No rumors about GPU launches in April. So, but I think there could be, for example, say AMD was going to get their products ready in October, and this big game launch and NVIDIA's launch was happening in September. AMD might, under those circumstances, decide to bring forward their launch if possible, if they were just, sitting on the cards. But I would generally think that these companies have planned to launch the products at a certain time a fair way in advance. So they're not just thinking, oh, big game's coming out, now's the time to launch. I wouldn't be surprised if, for example, the cards come out after the game. Like, it could, even if it's 2 weeks, that can be a fairly significant time difference between new hardware and games. How many products are going to be available? Is it just going to be high-end? Is it going to be the mid-range that people actually buy in? I think all those sorts of things complicate it too much. So I don't think it's like a Cyberpunk 2077 launch event. It's more those two things have happily aligned. And
the stars have aligned.
Yeah, so it might be a situation where NVIDIA pushes their launch a week ahead of Cyberpunk just to get ahead and be like, this is the card for Cyberpunk.
Sure.
But that's just a happy coincidence, I think.
Yeah. I was laughing quite a lot internally in your October to September example for radio and graphics cards. I could just imagine the execs, the marketing people going, yes, we'll push it forward 1 month, and the driver team's like that meme where the water's just pouring off the guy.
Yeah, the one guy who does all the drivers is like, oh my God, oh no.
They're doing it again. Next question here. Oh, this one is addressed at Tim. I'm not just throwing you under the bus for no reason. When is Tim going to make a video that does a deep dive on what all the settings / benchmarks mean in the monitor reviews? You have promised this for some time, Tim.
I know. People really want this content. They want me to explain grey to grey averages, colour space, delta E's, all that sort of
that's
thing.
all in there. That's all in there. I won't read the rest because we get the detail, the gist of it. So are we getting a date here, Tim? Are we putting this one in the calendar?
Oh, I can't put a firm date to it. I think it's more in the rumors and leak stage at this point. It's coming, but we're not necessarily sure when. I try my best
when you get time.
Yeah, I do try my best in the videos to explain sort of not necessarily what those exact terms mean and how they are calculated, but more what's a good value, what's a bad value, so that at least you sort of have an understanding that for a delta E, for example, you want it to be below 2. I'm not really explaining why a delta E of 2 is the sort of gold standard, but at least you then know, oh, my monitor is getting a 4 or a 5. That's not below 2, so it's not as good as the monitors that do. So hopefully some of that comes through in the reviews. It would be great if I could spend, 10 minutes in each review explaining each of the different things. Hopefully a video dedicated to that would help a lot of people that want to learn a lot about the monitor terminology. But yeah, hopefully over time people, just from sort of absorbing the content, figure out what is and isn't good, and some of the explanations help. But I'll make that video at some point, and we'll really dive into why Delta E 2.0 makes sense, how the averages are calculated, all that sort of thing. Since the 10600K is considered a good buy strictly for gaming, how much should one invest in cooling for this processor? Can also the cheap Z490 boards handle this chip if overclocked?
Couple of good questions there, and I don't have the answers for them. I would expect the cheap Z490 motherboards would handle a 6-core 12-thread 10th-gen part. I think that's fair to say. What do you reckon, Tim?
Yeah, it looks like a lot of the entry-level boards are sort of similar to what you got with Z370. So a lot of the boards now, high-end Z490, have much better VRMs than we got with that series.
Yep.
And, we're sort of thinking 8700K is quite similar to a 10600K. So you might not get the best overclocking experience from an entry-level Z490, but I would expect it to still be able to handle it.
Yeah. I think the problem with the cheap Z490 boards is just that the features are terrible. We were having a look at them the other day, Tim and I, over the phone, having a chat. And it's like, they have like 3 to 4 USB 3 ports and then 2 USB 2s on the I/O panel. And
you get like just very basic audio, like the 3 audio jack type situation, nothing special.
Compared to your decent B450 boards, such as the Tomahawk and Pro Carbon, they look terrible. I think for Z490 boards, you really do want to be aiming for sort of your Z490 Tomahawk territory, which is about 190 US, 180 to 190 US. So that's a pretty expensive motherboard, really, given the feature set's not mind-blowing. So I think that's sort of as cheap as you want to go. So what's that CPU? $280 thereabouts for the 10600K? I think it's a $260 tray price, isn't it? $262 or something like that. So about $280, I think. And then, $190 US for the motherboard. And then you factor in a decent cooler. I think to overclock it, you could probably get a cooler for around $30, $40, $50, somewhere around there. But I pretty much did all those calculations in my 10600K review. But yeah, if you're after, the maximum amount of, a good level of performance in gaming because you want some extra frames in CSGO or Fortnite or whatever it might be, then it makes sense in that scenario. But it is, it gets harder to justify, I suppose, as you start doing all the calculations and whatnot.
Yep.
But yeah, definitely worth overclocking because stock it's just too close to the Ryzen 5 3600, which is pretty much what I concluded. It's what Steve from Gamers Nexus concluded, and it's pretty much what most other reviewers have concluded. All right, next question here. Do you see the lack of PCIe 4.0 support on 10th gen Intel as a potential future bottleneck, both when it comes to storage and GPUs? So obviously, future storage devices and graphics cards and whatnot. I guess it all depends on how soon that stuff's coming and how much of a performance advantage it offers. With future graphics cards, we're just guessing here. There's a fair chance that PCIe 3.0 times 16 will be fine. We'll just have to wait and test that when it happens. There's no, as far as I'm aware, new storage devices looming on the horizon that will really see, big bottlenecks for PCIe 3.0. So I think it's fair to say over the next year, it's probably not going to make too much difference. But beyond that, possibly hard to say. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, again, I think you've summarized that pretty well. I'd say GPUs, probably not for a significant amount of time. It was a fair while until GPUs were being bottlenecked by PCIe 2.0. So, I would expect that, that's not going to be a big concern. And for storage, I I guess if you're doing some like super storage heavy production workloads or something like that, then yeah, maybe that's going to become a bottleneck eventually for some people. But for gaming, I think it'll be a fair while until games really start utilizing some of the storage benefits on PC and on the consoles. Even if the consoles launch with super fast storage, you know, a lot of the games might have been developed under different specifications, or they're only just starting to harness it. So by the time that comes around and starts to become a significant issue, I think both platforms will have PCIe 4.0 and it won't be too much of an issue. So I don't really see that as a big bottleneck. I think the more concerning thing for Intel are bottlenecks with like how high can clock speeds go on 14 nanometer, that sort of thing. Because if they can't get any advancements there, then yeah, they might be stuck.
Next one's aimed at me, probably because I do all the hard work. It's probably it, isn't it, Tim? Steve, with all your beautiful graphs and concise delivery, well, thank you. Just like reading out that question, how long does a normal video take to complete? I really do. I really appreciate all you do. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the content. I think we've talked about this in the past. So, like a top 5 best GPU video is much easier to smash together than an in-depth CPU review and then like a 30-game benchmark video. You're looking at weeks of benchmarking and then probably just a day or so of sort of filming and editing. But yeah, it all takes time. I mean, the more graphs you have, the longer it takes. Like a sort of exporting 30 graphs and making sure they're all right, that can, I don't know. I don't really know. Maybe, what's that, like a half an hour job, Tim?
Yeah, I'd say
somewhere
probably around that, exporting the graphs. I spend a few hours doing the editing, but it's all in the preparation work, like the benchmarking, the writing the script, the filming, all that sort of thing is the big time hog.
Yeah, I think editing can be anywhere from like 2 hours to 4 or 5, depending on what the content is. But yeah, thankfully I enjoy most of the process, so I don't sort of sit there going, oh, I've got another hour of graphing to do, kill me. So it's fine. All right, next question here. Would you guys ever make a bloopers episode? What would we put in a bloopers episode? Like, I never make any mistakes. What about you, Tim?
Yeah, I'm just 100% perfect delivery. I don't know. There's no editing in our videos. It's just constant A-roll. We're all good.
But yeah, to answer that one, probably not. Like when I make a mistake, it's not that funny. Occasionally, it's just, there's nothing really that great in there. So
it'll be a terrible bloopers episode. Go, just watch it for your favorite TV shows. No need to see ours. Wouldn't be good.
Nah. Okay, moving along. Next question is it better to buy a cheap X470 motherboard or an expensive B550 motherboard? I love your work, Harbour Boxed. There aren't many good X470 motherboards that are still on sale, really. And cheap ones I'd probably avoid. I don't think they'd have a particularly great VRM or whatever. And expensive B550, I'm not actually sure what an expensive B550 will look like, but I'd say you'd be able to get a pretty good quality B550 motherboard for like $120, somewhere around there, US. So, but if it comes down to buying an X470 or a B550 motherboard, I'd recommend the B550 all day because you get at least PCIe 4.0 for the graphics card and storage. How useful that is, it's hard to say. But that is an extra feature you get. And on top of that, you obviously get better CPU support. So, yeah, I think it's just a safer buy. But, of course, keep your eye out for our B550 VRM testing and everyone else's reviews to know which B550 motherboard to buy.
I'm interested in your thoughts, Steve, on this next question. Why do you sort the blue bar graphs by average FPS rather than 1% low FPS, even though you say that 1% lows are more indicative of the experience you have, such as stutters and frame drops?
I guess the reasons being the graphs are just, it's a little easier to sort of read the data, I think, instead of sort of, when you don't arrange by sort of the longest bar, the graphs look a bit messy, a bit all over the place. And yeah, the 1% lows for CPU testing are generally the most important thing to look at. But it's also really obvious if a CPU has really poor 1% lows. Like if you look at Battlefield 5 and you see something like a 9600K or a 7600K, you can they kind of stand out more so in that regard. But I think it's just so the graphs are a bit easier to follow.
Yeah.
In the past, I have arranged by 1% lows, and sort of confused a few people. I haven't really got it. And yeah, I think it's just easy enough to see the CPUs that perform poorly anyway. Why do Ryzen CPUs need more voltage while still running at clocks lower than Intel? We've seen Ryzen CPUs are more power efficient and usually cooler than Intel CPUs. Then what's the issue? I think it's just that we're comparing sort of apples and oranges on that one. Completely different process nodes, completely different architectures. So yeah, voltage requirements will differ.
Yeah, and it's not just the voltage that determines the power usage, it's the amperage as well, because power equals volts times amps. So yeah, when you look at sort of, it could be running at much lower amperages at those higher voltages, which would give you a more efficient CPU. So yeah, as you say, apples to oranges type comparison really. And yeah, the only interesting comparisons you can make there is sort of, yeah, is one Intel CPU running it lower than another Intel CPU? Is an AMD CPU running lower than AMD? That's kind of how those comparisons should be working most of the time.
Yeah, and we're looking more at performance per watt as well.
Yep.
So, you know, it doesn't really matter if the voltage is high, but you've got twice as many cores. So, anyway.
Yep. All right, Steve, this next question is for you, so get ready for some VRM stuff. How hot can a VRM run daily safely, and is hardware monitor accurate enough to semi-reasonably monitor VRM thermals? I asked because I was lucky enough to replace my wife's 2200G with a 1600 AF for $90 US, but the Mobo is an AB350M DS3H, so I think that's a gigabyte board, has no heat sinks. Hardware monitor is reporting maximum 65C under all-core load, clocked at 3.7 all-core.
Okay, well, 65 degrees is very cool, so if that is actually what the VRM's running at, that's an exceptionally good result. I'd be surprised if it depends what the all-core workload is, I suppose. But anyway, 65 degrees is perfectly fine. It can run at that 24/7 and have no problems at all. As for hardware monitor accurately reporting stuff, well, tools like Hardware Info are very accurate in reading the information they're given. So it comes down to how accurate is the information that they're, you know, the sensors they're reading from. And in my experience, it depends. Like sometimes when I put a thermal probe on there, I get like to the degree exactly what Hardware Info is reporting from the onboard VRM sensor. And then ASUS boards recently have just been weird. Like sometimes they're close, other times they're massively underreporting what the actual VRM temperature is. So there can be offsets and things like that, or the sensor's just completely useless. So your 65 degrees could be 100 for all you know, which is a bit of a problem, but that's just how it is. So I think it's a difficult one to answer, because if it was a mining rig and you're running under 100% load, heavy load, 24/7, you'd definitely be wanting to keep them under, well, I would say about 80 degrees. People will say, oh, you know, they can run safely at 100, 110, 120 degrees, no dramas. I don't know if you really want to be doing that 24/7. For short burst workloads, that's probably fine. You won't see too much sort of component degradation there. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like yours is all fine. I haven't tested that particular board. I don't imagine it's too amazing. But then the 1600 AF, you know, it's a 65 watt part. It's not gonna hammer the VRM too much. So I think you'd be pretty safe with that one. I wouldn't go putting an 8-core CPU on it or higher end though. All right, next question here. What was the driving force behind starting the channel? Maybe you can answer that one, Tim.
Not quite sure how I'd go about that one.
I think we've probably answered this before on the channel, but it might have been a few years ago. So I'll quickly summarize, guess how the channel began, because it's a very long story. And the way it started off wasn't sort of the way it's ended up, but I guess that's how a lot of things tend to go. So basically, back when the channel started, I was writing for TechSpot. That's pretty much what my job had been for at least the decade before that preceded that. Tim was the same. You were writing at TechSpot. Yep. I had a mate that had some free time on his hands, and he was really, really interested in YouTube, which was funny. It's crazy to think back. At the time, I didn't really watch YouTube much. It was more just like viral videos that would occasionally pop up or whatever. It wasn't something I really watched on a daily basis. It was still sort of the traditional TV type stuff. And anyway, he really wanted to start a tech channel, which I wasn't at all interested in doing because I guess without sounding too harsh or whatever, I just thought that benchmarks on YouTube were kind of not great. I won't really give my true thoughts there, but I just didn't think it was a very good format for it. I thought TechSpot and websites were a lot better, so I wasn't interested. He was, though. He really pushed and pushed and pushed for weeks to do it, and I said, look, if you want to do it, I can help you with it. You know, obviously I've got the camera gear, I've got all the new products, so we can start a channel. And he really wanted to do unboxing videos, which I was even less interested in. So we did like a couple of unboxing videos for, you know, unboxing products, sort of like unbox therapy type stuff, I suppose. And he was like, yeah, this is really boring. This sucks. How about we do the more technical TechSpot type content on Hardware Unboxed? And then we started doing that. And yeah, I got more and more sucked into it. I kind of really liked the community we were building at Hardware Unboxed. And it was kind of interesting doing what I'd done previously in written form, in video form. I was really enjoying because I was doing a lot of the video editing, a lot of the filming of the B-roll, learning all that. And obviously we're still learning as we go. And yeah, that's sort of how it started to take off. And I think after about a year and a half, we got to about 45,000 subscribers. And it sort of got to the point where, you know, the channel wasn't really making any money, and we'd been doing it for a year and a half by this point. It had just cost us a fair bit of money, and Matt wasn't really that passionate about this stuff. Like, he sort of started with his interest being in gaming peripherals and stuff like that, and we'd sort of headed in more of a technical CPU, GPU, motherboard type direction. So it was a lot of work. He wasn't that passionate about it, wasn't really wanting to put all the time and effort into making that content. So a few things changed in his life at the same time as well, and he just decided that he didn't want to go ahead with it. So that was that, really. And then I was faced with the decision of killing the channel and just going back to TechSpot or not. But as I said, I really enjoyed the community that we'd built around the channel. It was really engaging, a lot of positivity. I was like learning a lot about what people really wanted to see and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, well, I guess I'll jump in front of the camera, something I didn't really want to do, and have a go at this. And everyone was really supportive. I wasn't really sure how it would go because everyone had sort of got to know and love Matt over the year and a half or whatever it was. And then I sort of jumped in front of the camera and thought, oh, yeah, this could be a bit brutal. But yeah, everyone seemed quite happy with the change, or happy enough, and we went from there. And the goal was always, even back then, wasn't it, Tim, to bring you on at some point? More of a part-time thing.
Yeah, at some point. Yep.
I think even when Matt was on the channel, I was having a lot of talks with Tim, and he was going to come over and be like the resident phone guy. There'd be like maybe a video once or so once a week, or maybe once every 2 weeks from Tim. And then when Matt left and it was just me, I sort of really went hard at it for a year, got it up to, I think, maybe like 150,000 subscribers, somewhere around that mark. And then Tim came on and yeah, we went from there. So that, believe it or not, that's the short version of how it all happened.
Nice short summary. Let's get to the next one.
All right, last question here. Will you guys still be going to Computex 2020 this September? No.
No chance.
Going this year. No.
If we came back into Australia, not only would we have to quarantine for 2 weeks, but I don't think there's going to be much happening at the show. I just think most of the major announcements have already happened. B550, potentially new CPU refreshers, GPUs are going to be a different event entirely, you would think. So for all the stuff we cover, it's just, it's not going to be an event for us.
Now, anything that does get announced around that time will certainly be covered on the channel remotely. But yeah, no Computex for us this year, which is a bit sad, but it is what it is. So yeah, hopefully next year we can go. We'll see what happens.
And that does it for the YouTube questions for the Q&A series for May. We'll be back with part 3 soon. We'll be covering all the Patreon questions, as we mentioned, I think in the last episodes. Probably a bit too late to get your Patreon questions in now, but it's always worth signing up and making sure that you're a supporter. You can ask questions in our Discord chat and we'll answer them for next month. And always really appreciate the support we get there. You can subscribe as well. All of our high quality reviews are coming soon. More news, more content's always coming into your inbox. Never slows up here for Hardware Unboxed. So great time to be subscribed. And what else? I think only 20, like we said last time, only 20% of people watched to this point of the video. Maybe even less.
I don't even know why we bother. We should just sit back and be like, yep, that's another one done. We'll pad out the runtime. We'll just sit back and relax and have a drink, something to eat.
That'd be
so
good.
I could go some.
I think people would love seeing us just eat on the videos, just without any dialogue or anything. Just munching down some food. That'll be high quality content.
The timestamp is eating.
Yeah,
just down
so
the bottom.
good. Like it's like a 9-minute block of us just chomping down on stuff. Anyway, you won't be getting that in this video. Maybe a future video will go for the eating segment, but
that's a Patreon exclusive for now.
Yeah, we'll keep
high
it that
quality
way.
content.
That's pretty much it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think this is the point where we just say thank you very much for watching.
Yep.
I'm thinking of food now. I've left.
Yep.
Yeah. Thankfully, only 20% of our viewers are seeing this, so I've only made myself look like an ass in front of a small percentage of our viewership.
Yep.
But thank you very much for watching. I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim. We'll see you in the next one.
See you next time. Bye-bye.